everyone. Welcome back to Reimagine 2020 V2. We're here at our fourth event. I'm your host, Roshan Mirajkar. I'm one of the directors here at MouseBelt on the university team, as well as running the Reimagine events. And I'm joined here by Nick White, who is a returning guest, and he's one of the co-founders of Harmony Protocol. Nick, thank you so much for joining us today. I'll give you a second to introduce yourself. And I just want to remind everyone that our theme for this event is Tales from the Crypt. So we're looking at all kinds of inside stories and trying to see how different people from different backgrounds got into the space and what they're working on now. Nick, thank you so much for being here today.
Well, I just want to say thank you, Roshan, and hello, everyone. Thanks to Reimagine for hosting me again. It was a pleasure to be on last time. And I love the new theme. Especially your costume. It makes me feel underdressed or a little bit boring. So anyway, yeah, I'm Nick. I'm co-founder of Harmony, and Harmony is a scalable layer 1 blockchain that supports EVM smart contracts. And our vision is really to provide a more scalable blockchain so that we can, achieve all the great innovation that we think blockchains have in store. Whether it's decentralized finance, whether it's gaming and NFTs, or all the myriad other use cases that people are excited about. And we started in 2018. We launched our mainnet with staking and sharding in May of this year. And we're currently launching lots of new stuff, which we can get into later in the show. But yeah, I'm just excited to share my knowledge and my story and my experience, and anything else that you're curious to hear about Harmony.
Yeah, it's exciting to meet you. And before we get into Harmony's updates, I definitely want to start off for viewers with learning more about how you sort of got into the space, and maybe any interesting stories you have as far as the crypto industry is very unconventional, I would say. Different people have gotten in different ways. So, what were you working on before Harmony as far as projects? And where did it all start from you? And any weird stories you'd like to share? I think it'd be interesting to start off with that.
Sure. So I think everyone in crypto has an interesting origin story, because to be honest, this industry is a little bit non-traditional. It's a little weird and edgy. And so in order to kind of not only hear about it, but then also decide to get involved in the space, it requires a certain kind of experience or a certain kind of person. So I don't think my story is necessarily unique, but it is kind of cool the way I got into it. So I went to Stanford, actually, and I remember one time overhearing people talking in the cafeteria hall about mining Bitcoin. And I thought, oh man, that's so weird, blah, blah, blah. I was actually studying electrical engineering and computer science, so it should have been right up my alley, but I didn't yet really grasp the importance of the innovation that was Bitcoin at the time. This was probably in 2013, 2014. And then later, when I graduated from Stanford and I moved to Hong Kong and was working in venture capital at this AI incubator, a lot of my peers in venture capital were talking about blockchain and cryptocurrencies. And so I kind of naturally started tuning into their conversations and reading up about it so I could be more knowledgeable and be able to participate in the conversations, even though it wasn't really related to what I was doing for work. And eventually, and at first, I really struggled with this idea of like Bitcoin, like, what is it? It's not backed by anything, right? I think we all kind of go through that, where you're like, okay, I had read the white paper and I had taken me some time, but I figured out how you could create such a blockchain, right? And the properties that it would have, but then why would I want to own Bitcoin? Like there's nothing behind it. And so there were sort of a series of revelations I had to first realize that, oh, actually value is just what people, it's a social consensus essentially, right? The reason why the US dollar has value is sort of in parallel the same question. Same with gold or any other asset, right? It's all about what people demand, what people want. And so that was kind of one of the first key leaps. And then when I started learning about Ethereum, and I realized that basically Ethereum enabled you to create sort of like a shared world that in which like you could kind of create a world and define your own laws in that world, and people would then be able to engage and collaborate within those rules to create something bigger. That's super abstract, but I had that revelation because I just recently, maybe the year before, read the book Sapiens, and in Sapiens he talks a lot about what makes humanity different than other species, right? Why are humans so powerful on the global stage of nature? And the reason really boils down to the fact that we can have shared imagined realities, meaning that as human, and that shared imagined reality allows us to collaborate beyond our sort of genetic boundaries, right? Bees and ants collaborate in very complex systems, but they're all kind of connected through the same gene pool, right? And it's trust in this shared imagined reality that allows people to trade, it allows nations to form, allows for religions to operate. And essentially, all the greatest achievements of humanity boil down to this phenomenon that we're able to become sort of like a greater organism through our collaboration. So getting back to blockchain and Ethereum, I realized that basically blockchains were a new way of creating ways for human beings to collaborate. And the first applications are new currencies, right? But that the potential use cases were just extraordinary, and that just completely blew my mind. And it was kind of at that moment that I realized, okay, AI is cool, it's what I've been studying, but blockchain is really something that is so fundamental, and it's very rare to have an opportunity to be part of a revolution of this size. So that's kind of my origin story. So it was, from Stanford to Hong Kong, and in Hong Kong having these realizations and just deciding, what, that's it, I'm going to work in the space. And so I left that company, and I ended up meeting my co-founder, Steven, and RJ and Sahil, and we basically made Harmony in mid 2018. The rest is history.
And how long were you in Hong Kong for? I think you had a lot of great ideas in there as far as how, tying it into the sapiens, that idea that we are the only ones that evolve in a lot of different things. I think that's very true for something like money, even different other animals, they understand money, but for some reason, as humans, we've always tried to evolve our money. So, what I kind of wanted to ask you is, with the whole situation going on right now, it seems like, when we talked to you in our last conference, maybe things would get back to normal, but a little more normal. But now it seems like this is more the norm in terms of evolving into a virtual world. So, what's your perspective when you see now large industries buy Bitcoin or have more exposure to blockchain? I know one thing you talk about being involved in Harmony is kind of seeing the digitization of everything. What do you think is going to be that next exciting bit of news? Is it going to be more companies getting into blockchain exposure, not just buying the assets, but digitizing existing assets, things like NFT and gaming? Is that going to come from industry, or do you think the excitement is going to come from people, wanting to find new ways to interact digitally, I guess is my question.
Well, there's a lot in there to unpack, but I think, just picking on the point about companies starting to announce that they're investing in Bitcoin or supporting it, right? So we have obviously it was MicroStrategy, right? Was it Michael Saylor? And also then Square announcing that they had invested significant amounts, tens, hundreds of millions in Bitcoin in their corporate accounts, as well as PayPal just recently announcing they're supporting Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies for their users. I think this is huge because I heard something that really kind of like stuck out to me, which is that Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies actually are more investable or a better investment the higher the price is. And what that means is like the higher the price of Bitcoin, then the greater social consensus there is that Bitcoin has value. So therefore, it's less risky actually to put money in. If you were the people buying Bitcoin at $1 back in, I don't know, 2010, sure, that seems like a great investment in hindsight, but actually at that moment in time, no one had heard of Bitcoin. The likelihood that Bitcoin would become this asset and actually succeed seemed so small at that moment in time, right? So it was a very risky investment then. And now that Bitcoin's over $10,000, it's still a very good risk-adjusted investment, I think. But the point is, there's so much less risk because Bitcoin every time the price increases, it's kind of crossing a threshold of acceptance. And so when you see people like Paul Tudor Jones or Michael Saylor say, hey, we're investing in Bitcoin, and as the price climbs, it adds to this element of social consensus. And by the time, let's say, Bitcoin becomes a multi-trillion-dollar asset, it's only stronger and stronger, and more people will take it seriously. So it has this very interesting feedback loop that I think we should really pay attention to, and it's very powerful. I mean, how else would you bootstrap something from literally of zero value to now today $200 billion in market cap? So I think that's one of the really good parts about these companies coming out publicly and saying we're investing in Bitcoin, is it adds to the social consensus, which is that is the fundamental value of any cryptocurrency.
Yeah, and I like your point about social consensus because I think most of blockchain and cryptocurrency, the protocols, what a lot of the value is derived from is from social consensus. Whether it's miners, people staking. You have different types of algorithm, proof of work versus proof of stake. I wanted to ask you, when you talk about kind of digging a little deeper into, from your perspective, what you think a lot of the value, what you think a lot of the future value will come from. Do you think that we'll see the value derived from the actual usage, or do you think that people will find blockchain, let's say NFTs, things like that? Will they find a different use case in terms of just easier way to collect something, or do you think people will actually start to use this, maybe in the world we live in right now?
This is a great question, and I don't think anyone knows the right answer yet. I think I will say, in 2017 there was this whole boom of utility tokens, right? And let's be honest, most of them didn't work out, right? The idea was like, hey, I'm going to create a token in order to use my platform. Then you have to pay with this token. So basically people were trying to force a certain currency within their little zone, right? And now people are calling utility tokens futility tokens because it didn't work out, that most of them turned out to be pretty much valueless, right? And the reason for that is that, kind of getting back to your original question, there's kind of two, I see the emergence of kind of different sort of asset subclasses within crypto assets. So there's one asset subclass that you could consider like a monetary asset. And what that means, and like what is money, right? Money is something that, it's not something that you consume or use directly. It's something that has value intrinsically, right? So people talk a lot about, hey, well, Bitcoin and Ethereum have a monetary premium, meaning that the price in Bitcoin and Ethereum is not justified by the utility of, hey, I can use Bitcoin to send a transaction on the Bitcoin network. Let's be honest. Bitcoin is valuable because people see it as a digital store of value, a digital gold. So that's kind of a monetary asset. And I think the same, most layer ones, I think, are seeking to become monetary assets, to develop a monetary premium. Now, the other subclass is emerging in the world of DeFi. And those are more like capital assets, meaning that's like, just to demystify that term, that basically means they're like a share in a company, in that they're kind of like a share of cash flows, of future cash flows of a given protocol. It's still decentralized, right? You know, if I own Uni tokens, which are the governance token of Uniswap, the Uniswap protocol can still be decentralized, but this Uni token entitles me to a certain amount of the cash flows or the profit generated by that protocol. So that these DeFi tokens, these governance tokens, are a lot more like stocks, and they're easier to value for that reason. You know, you can use some of the traditional valuation metrics like discounted future cash flows, and so that's kind of like, those are sort of the two main camps that I'm seeing. The interesting part is the intersection, which is these like proof of stake tokens, because proof of stake tokens are, you know, obviously issued by a layer one, and so they're trying to be a monetary asset, I think. But at the same time, proof of stake tokens are sort of a work token, or like a share of the future inflation rewards of a given protocol. So you can also kind of value them in terms of like the future cash flow. So that they're kind of, it's sort of like a bond and like a monetary asset at the same time. It's very confusing, you know, to be honest. I think certain things in crypto are going to fit nicely into like traditional frameworks of thinking, and others are just going to be sort of a new thing that we'll have to figure out and learn how we classify them and how we think about them.
Yeah, and as we have these conversations, you know, one interesting thing that people talk about a lot, or that I've heard of, is, you know, protocols like Bitcoin and many others, you always have continuous software upgrades that is making the entire network better, transactions cheaper. You know, sometimes they're still fairly expensive, like you mentioned, maybe it's not for everything. Do you think that protocols that are kind of more built on software, you know, you have more developers working on them, kind of have an edge as opposed to, you know, things like NFTs are getting really popular now, but I'm not sure if you can exactly upgrade an NFT in the same way. Kind of what you were just talking about, the difference between, you know, having some protocols that are more monetary, others, you might just have a more modern version, you know. So maybe I want to give you a perspective a little bit on what you think some of the limitations are to some of these things. You know, are there things in crypto that can improve at a much faster rate than, you know, I'll call them other types of assets, or I'll call them other types of tools, right? You can do a variety of different things. For example, you know, transactions is one bucket, and NFTs are another. But yeah, I won't speak too much. I'll let you answer that.
Yeah, well, I think what you're kind of getting at is, you know, we're seeing an explosion of different kinds of protocols, and each with their own different trade-offs and benefits and approaches. So it's really, it can be bewildering, right? And it can be kind of hard to wrap your head around, you know, why do they all exist and which ones are going to be used for what reasons and why.
Exactly.
And so, you know, it's interesting because there's kind of a knee-jerk reaction. Like as you get into blockchain and cryptocurrencies, you start to, and especially when you first realize, oh wow, there's this new thing like Ethereum, right, and smart contracts, it can be very tempting to think that, wow, any smart contract platform has a huge advantage over one that doesn't, like for example, Bitcoin. But I don't know if that's necessarily true, because it's all a set of trade-offs essentially, and Bitcoin has made a trade-off of being very static, and not the amount of changes that happen to Bitcoin are very they're very slow, and they're very careful about what they change and what they update. And they've made the choice not to support smart contracts because it can also increase the attack surface of the protocol, meaning that it's easier for someone to steal funds or break things, right? And Bitcoin chooses purposefully to be just to prioritize security, right? Because they're trying to be digital gold. They're trying to be a store of value. And that means you have to be as secure as possible. So that's kind of one spectrum of one side of the spectrum. And then on the other side of the spectrum, well, and then kind of in the middle, you have Ethereum, right? Which is taking a different set of trade-offs, enables smart contracts, and also, to their credit, is actually pretty quick at adopting new trends and new technology, right? Because if you think about it, on the one hand, kind of choosing to stay static, like Bitcoin is sort of like saying, hey, we're only going to use DSL for the rest of our, time. Meaning, like, imagine if you had an application that said, I'm only going to use DSL internet connections, and then in the future, like 20 years, 30 years later, all of a sudden it's like, whoa, man, you missed out on all of this innovation. But in Bitcoin's case, I think it can work. So anyway, Ethereum is sort of being a little bit more aggressive or open-minded to new developments as we upgrade from DSL to broadband and 5G, let's say, right? But to be honest, the other thing about Ethereum is that they have to move slower because they already have a network that's out there. And once you are sort of decentralized like Ethereum is, it's not as easy to just change everything. You already have all this value and all these contracts, all these applications layered on top. And the more that you layer, the harder it is to move the bottom, right? The bottom is this core protocol. And any change can break lots of things up here. And so they're kind of forced to move slower. And that's why everyone criticizes them. Like, there's all those memes online. I don't know if you've seen them where it's like, what is it?
I've seen them.
someone's wait. Oh, ETH 2.0 finally gets released, and there's like some guy and like a skeleton, like he's been waiting there for so long or something. Which, we can laugh about it, but honestly, I give the Ethereum community credit for even moving as fast as they have, given what we were just talking about. And then on the far side of the spectrum are projects like Harmony, who are we don't have an established ecosystem. We're relatively new, but because of that, we're able to move much more nimbly and use a lot of sort of groundbreaking new technology and prove it out, right? There's definitely, this is a lot higher risk, a lot more things can go wrong, but also we have the opportunity to be significantly faster and more efficient than Ethereum or Bitcoin. So there's a whole spectrum there, and I don't, even within this, there's a whole world of different trade-offs. And I think only time is really going to tell which trade-offs make the most sense. But some of the things that you can do, and which we've done at Harmony, is you can choose to be compatible with what's come before you, right? And pieces of the ecosystem that do make sense. So in our case, a lot of other layer one chains decided, like, oh, we're going to use a different programming language and a different virtual machine to run smart contracts. And in our thinking, we realized, there's so much intellectual capital as well as infrastructure around the EVM and Solidity and all of that, including auditors, all the IDEs and developer tools, and token standards. All these things have already been built out. That's years and years of effort. So, and it's very mature. Why would we try to recreate that all from scratch? It sounds like honestly a very, very difficult thing, right? So rather than do that, we just support that out of the box, and we can borrow a lot from the Ethereum community at that layer. And so I think, that's kind of the trade-off that we've chosen. And so it'll be interesting, but I think that really makes it a lot easier for developers from Ethereum to migrate their applications to Harmony. And so I think that long-term that will be very beneficial as we try to grow an ecosystem from scratch.
Yeah, actually, can you kind of get into your thoughts a little bit more? I think one thing people get wrong a lot about in this space is, I think, a lot of outsiders, new people, they think that all these protocols are competing with each other, kind of like traditional markets where you have Apple versus Google. You have these same large Goliath players who are competing against each other, but, there's things that they work on together too. Can you sort of explain to some of the maybe new people out there, what do you just think is different about this space? Because what you just kind of talked about, I think was, how you're not really competing with Ethereum. There may be on some elements, but you're also building off that established network. And I don't think anything in the traditional markets, really even exists like that. So do you think there's some unique like competitive advantage per se of how you can enter the space, let's say as a new company or someone new getting into the space, where you don't have to compete, you can build off of something existing?
Yeah, I think you bring up a really good point, and people want this space to be very cutthroat. Everyone talks about Ethereum killers, and it comes off as very competitive. And the reality is that there's a lot of ways to actually grow the pie together, and I think that's more valuable, right? What's the point? The reality is, if you look at the industry where it is today, we are so small compared to where we're going, right? The future is so bright and it's huge. So rather than trying to make each other's lives harder by competing over this small piece, we should be working together to solve the problems. And honestly, we'll all do fine in the end. Like there's enough to go around, right? And ultimately, I feel like that, the shared vision is there of I think we all kind of want the same end goal, which is for blockchain to change the world, to make it more transparent, to make it to democratize financial services, all these things. I think we all kind of share a similar vision, so we don't need to be fighting. But the reason why I especially am hopeful about this sort of multi-chain world, rather than like a one chain to rule them all, is that there have been a lot of advances in interoperability over the past few years. And so what interoperability is, it's kind of like the vision of Cosmos or Polkadot, although they have their own sort of specific ecosystems within interoperability. You can have different blockchains that are designed with different trade-offs that can talk to each other. And so the ecosystems, aren't completely isolated, right? It's not like Ethereum is here and there's an Ethereum world, and then there's Harmony and it's a separate planet, and there's no way to move between them. It's like now we've got, let's say Ethereum is Earth and Harmony is Mars. We've got Elon Musk who's going to be able to send rockets over, and we're going to have be able to trade and exchange value across these chains and work together. And I think that's really an exciting thing. And so Harmony's been working very hard on building bridges. We just launched our first bridge to Ethereum this week. So there's a lot of progress being made, and I'm very excited that we're getting closer and closer to a world where, hey, I've got some money or some assets on Ethereum, but you know what? It's really expensive right now. The gas is too high to do what I wanted to do. So you know what? I'm just going to move over to Harmony, And once I'm on Harmony, it's super fast and super cheap. I can exchange, I can invest in a DeFi protocol here. And then when I'm done and then when I'm ready to go back, I can always go back. And I think that's kind of the world that we'll be moving towards over the next, I would say, 1 to 2 years, as more and more of these bridges come online and people realize how easy it is to move between chains.
Yeah, thanks for kind of going into that more deeply, because I do think it's very important. It's one of the things that make this space unique in the sense that, yeah, we're all building different things, but yeah, we are all using same networks, similar types of smart contracts. And that is something that, is different, this concept of open source. To kind of wrap things up here, what I do want to ask you, with staying with the Halloween theme, what's the thing that scares you the most in this space? It could be anything, like hacks, not getting enough adoption. I'll just leave it open-ended to you, but what's something that you still have some fear of in the back of your mind that you're like not so solid about?
That's a really good question. One of my big doubts used to be whether or not we can solve scalability for blockchains. I think that we will solve it. I think there are enough different approaches that now one of them will be successful. And so I'm no longer worried about that. And that was really the motivation behind Harmony. What worries me more, I would say, is we're still very early. I know it feels like a lot of people are like, oh, Bitcoin's so expensive. I can't believe it's over $10,000. Like I'm late to the whole crypto thing. And I think they're just not using their imagination to realize how big this opportunity is, how big this industry will become. But the flip side of that is that we're still so early that, it could, if we kind of, if there's someone who's powerful enough that wants to break us down, I think there's actually a chance that they could succeed in doing so. So that's probably my biggest fear is like, I don't know who these entities are that would be powerful enough, probably countries, nation states. And how would they attack let's say the Bitcoin network or any of the crypto networks? Maybe they mess with the internet itself, or maybe they, collect enough hashing power to actually start messing with, the protocols directly, or enough staking power to do so. I don't know, but the total value of all of crypto right now is small enough that I think it's very feasible for these larger entities to do something like that and to be successful. So I am worried about that happening. So my hope is that they don't pay attention to us for long enough that we can sort of get big enough where then it's too hard. And also I think we need to start, that's why we needed to take decentralization very seriously, because that's the way that we actually defend against this. And that is really a sort of like the ultimate ride or die. Like we either if one of these attacks does happen, then I'm sure we'll grow back, but we'll have lost a lot of traction. So that's why decentralization is really paramount to the whole industry. So I hope that I think that's the main message I would like to sort of share out there.
Yeah, I think that's a great message to end things off. Build more bridges, collaborate with each other, and yeah, it's great what Harmony is doing. Every time we've spoken to you so far, you have new updates for us. So I encourage everyone to check those out. And I'm really glad you have this mindset of building integrations. Nick, if you have any other words, last words to say. Otherwise, that'll be it. Do you have any last words?
I'll just say thank you so much for having me. I hope everyone enjoyed it and learned something. If you ever want to get in touch with me, I am on Twitter at Nick White, but instead of an I in the white, it's an 8. You can also learn more about Harmony at harmony.one. That's our website. And we have a Telegram community, we have a Discord channel. So if you want to get involved, please join and start having a chat. Other than that, thanks again to Reimagine. Thank you, Roshan, and happy Halloween, everyone.
Thank you, Nick, for giving us your time again. It was great speaking to you again. Thanks, everyone. I'm your host, Roshan, and tune back into Reimagine 2020. Enjoy the next episode. Thank you.